Okay, great. We've all received the notification. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the January 24th, 2022 Park Advisory Committee meeting at the East Bay Regional Park District. And it looks like it is 4:02 p.m. And if I don't know if it's Sarah or Flora would be so kind as to please take roll.
I am happy to take roll, Chair. We'll start with Vice Chair Tsutsui.
Here.
Hello. Member Arce.
Here.
Member Burke.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Member Carey.
Here.
Member Chang. Oh, I see in the waiting room. I believe we have Member Chang as well. Member Chang is present.
Here.
Hello. Member Claxton.
Here. Hi,
Member
everybody.
Corkin.
Here.
Hello, Member Corkin. Member Deschambeau.
Here.
Member Dieter.
Here.
Member Lacey. Member Lacey. Not present. Member Mahadevan. Member Mahadevan. Not present. Member Nason.
Here.
Member Robinson.
Here.
Member San Juan.
Here.
Member Skaradov. Member Williams. Member Williams and Chair Oberner.
And I am here as well. Thank you.
I can also recognize a few folks from the Park District, including Board of Directors member Beverly Lane, who is present. Also present tonight from the folks that I see is AGM of Operations, Jim O'Connor, AGM of Public Safety, Chief Anthony Chaburo is present as well. I see AGM of Acquisition, Stewardship and Development, Christina Kelchner, hello. Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, Eric Feeler is present. In addition, Chief Administrative Officer, Juliana Shermer is here. Interpretation and Recreation, I see Ann Cassabaum. Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails and GIS is here. And unless I'm missing anyone, I see Legislative and Policy Management Analyst, Lisa Baldinger, Matthew James, who is assisting with this meeting, and myself and Sarah Kennedy from Prime Gov. I may have missed a few folks, but I believe that concludes roll call.
Great. Thank you very much, Flora. So at this time, I just want to share information about the Brown Act. So today's committee meeting is being held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board of Directors and staff may participate in the board meetings, or I should say instead of Board of Directors, PAC members. And staff may participate in these meetings via phone video conferencing and or a hybrid of in-person attendance. We're also providing live audio streaming and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. And this information can be found on the agenda on the district website, ebparks.org. Do any committee members have any questions on the meeting procedures?
This is Igor Skaradov. I'm checking in late for a roll call.
Thank you for joining us, Igor. Welcome. And I'm sure that Flora will note that you are here and present. So welcome. Thank you. Okay, I don't see anyone with hands raised about questions for the meeting procedures. I think we're pretty familiar with this at this point in time. So hearing none, we are going to proceed with the agenda. So the next item on the agenda, we do have approval of our meeting minutes from November 29th. And I just want to see if there's any, if there's a motion to approve and if there are any changes to the meeting minutes from November 29th.
I move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, great. So a motion made by Linda and a second made by Rick. And Flora, if you would be so kind as to conduct a roll call vote.
Absolutely, Chair Obringer. Vice Chair Tsutsui.
Aye.
Thank you. Member Arce. Member Arce.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Burke.
Aye.
Member Carey.
Aye.
Member Chang.
Here.
Member Claxton.
Aye.
Member Corkin.
Aye.
Member Deschambeau.
Aye.
Member Dieter.
Aye.
Member Lacy. No member Lacy. Member Mahadevan. No member Mahadevan. Member Nason.
Aye.
Member Robinson.
Aye.
Member San Juan.
Yes.
Member Skaradov.
Aye.
Member Williams.
I'm sorry, I just joined the meeting, and I don't know what the action is.
Sure, we're voting to approve the November 29th meeting minutes, and we did not have any proposed changes or revisions.
I would vote aye for that.
Thank you, Member Williams. Noted. And finally, Chair Obringer.
I vote aye as well. Thank you.
Oh, this is Rick Rickard. You didn't call me, but I vote aye as well.
Oh.
Oh, Rick, we're sorry. Your input is valued, so we apologize.
Especially that yes vote.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much for that. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Board Member Beverly Lane. She represents Ward 6 on the board, on the East Bay Regional Park District Board. And so Board Member Lane, you are invited to present us with some comments. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I haven't been here in a while, and here we are at a new year. So I thought what I would do today is just bring you a few updates of what's been going on from the board's perspective, and wish you happy new year. A number of things have been happening. Of course, we start the new year and we have a new board chair, Colin Coffey, and we have new members distributed in all of the board committees. So there's a turnover there, and in general, people get their first choice on a committee, and the committees meet with the first new members in January. So one of the topics that the board's been talking about is redistricting. You know, as you know, it's that time again every 10 years. Every elected board needs to examine what their boundaries are. And for us, we have 7 wards, and we have hired a National Demographics Corporation to assist us in redistricting. And we had a workshop last week to go over what were seen as communities of interest inside our wards, hear from the board members about what they might like to see differently or the same. Again, it's a very interesting process that you do every decade. And our goal is to have the wards be at least within 10% of each other. And if we were all perfectly distributed, each of us would have 407,000 people in each ward. So we have large wards, as you could certainly observe. Then another new thing for us is that we have hired a new general counsel for the Park District, Lynn Borgald, who was competed very nicely, and we decided that we would like to have her as our general counsel. In the time I've been on the board, we've only had, she will be the third general counsel. So people often will stay for a while, and we hope that that will be the case for her. She has extensive background, extremely good litigation results, and knowledge about land, labor, and loves the Park District. So I hope you'll all get a chance to meet her at some point. Then there is the issue of COVID inside the Park District. What we are doing currently is we are asking people to come back to work and generally having working to have people wear masks unless they are in their office by themselves. And certainly with Omicron, we're including people, we're distributing N95 masks broadly and encouraging people to wear them outside at work as well as in inside work. We're proud to say the people who have caught COVID inside the Park District, who work for the Park District, have caught it outside of the work environment. And that's something that we can be very proud of. And we're, proud of the people working for us in general. With the Omicron, all people said, oh yes, I need to be outside again. And so we've again had a surge of a lot of people coming into the parks, both on trails and inside the parks themselves. The board itself is meeting both remotely and in person. Our last meeting, where we formally greeted Colin as president, there were 3 of us in the boardroom and 4 who met remotely. So we seem to have worked that out technologically, but I won't pretend that any of this is really satisfactory, because we all like to see one another in actual person. So that will happen, I'm sure, later on this year. I'm newly on the legislative committee again, and at our last legislative committee meeting, we reviewed a legislative program overview, which you might want to take a look at. It is a new document that Lisa Ballinger put together for us, with Eric weighing in, and probably Flora and a few other people. And what we are doing with that is trying to have a general description of what our goals are in our legislative programs. And it's meant to be a clarifying document, but as it turns out, it's kind of a long document. And it also has a history of our legislative activities in it, which of course is interesting to me. And then finally, I'll just say how important PAC is to us. It is. I mean, you are our general public voice. And many of you are appointed by board members. And I hope that you will take advantage of giving your board member a call to talk about issues of importance to you and to the PAC, and not be shy about doing that. And for those of you who are appointed by other entities, I hope you will be sure to make regular reports to them and hear their park issues. Carlin does this very well at the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference, which I certainly appreciate. And I think it makes a a difference to the board members in those different groups to be reminded that the Park District is there and doing some things that they may be really interested in. So I always appreciate those reports. And I have been going to Mayor's Conference regularly via Zoom. It's an easy thing to do. In prior years, I used to come to the mayor's conferences that were in the cities inside my ward, which is 6 cities. But now I'm, dropping in every first Thursday to get a little taste of what they are talking about and learning about in that setting. So I think with that, I will stop. And if anybody has any questions about this or other things happening from the board's point of view, I'd be glad to try and answer questions.
Thank you very much, Board Member Lane. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve on this body as a result of the Contra Costa Mayor's Conference appointment. So I need to let them know I'm actually doing something for that appointment.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to open it up to everybody to see if anyone has any questions for Director Lane. I'm looking, I don't see any hands going up, either physically or virtually. So I think that you have answered the questions about Ward 6 for today, Director Lane. So
Okay, thank you. I'll be here for the whole meeting. So,
well, thank you very much. So if something does come up, people can ask you. So thank you very much for updating us.
thanks.
So now we're going to move on to item number 4. We're going to receive a report from Juliana Shermer, Chief Administrative Officer, and she is going to provide us with this month's foundation update.
So if I unmute myself, thanks for having me. It's hard to believe it's 2022 and we're already giving a report for 2021. Seems like just a couple months ago, we were talking about our first full year of COVID and the impacts it was having for both the Park District and the Regional Parks Foundation. But yes, we have now officially concluded, well, almost our second full year. I'm happy to say that the community continues to support the foundation and through us, the Park District, very, very well. I don't want to go into too much detail today because we will be bringing forward a more broad presentation, hopefully for you in February with our annual PowerPoint. But I can give you the high level details today to let you know. We did end the year raising $6.8 million, which is 400% more than expected. That came from a couple different sources. We did receive $3.3 million from the East Costa County Habitat Conservancy for the endowment and $1.4 million in bequests. Our membership program has rebounded from what you heard me say in 2020 was an area of concern. We've been down to about 9,500 members that year, and I'm pleased to say we're back up to 12,400, which is our highest level of membership ever. And we have had a 14% increase in those members going to become a donor circle member, meaning that they're giving above and beyond their annual membership level. We have continued to see a little bit of a struggle with our corporations and foundations, and I don't think that's a huge surprise. Many of them have pivoted their giving towards safety net social services for employment, housing, COVID relief, and or kind of PPE supplies for some of those other nonprofits. But we also did get a couple new foundations giving to us last year, and DuPont was one of those. And then we did also receive $100,000 from California Native Plant Society for Oak Restoration Project. So we did get a couple of really nice gifts that helped us in that category. And then as far as like general work of the foundation and some of the things that staff and our board have been working on, I would say our DEI committee continues to be really important. We're still focusing on our free membership program. We are partnering with approximately 20 different nonprofit organizations right now and looking to expand that and giving those memberships away. And our most recent partnership is giving through the Ohlone tribes and trying to bring in Indigenous peoples into that membership program. So that was very successful at the end of last year as well. And looking forward to this year, I would say it's all of those things. We're still looking forward to launching that Tilden EEC capital campaign. It's been stalled a little bit due to COVID, but we're really looking forward to doing that this year. We're kicking off our fundraising. Everything is really strong. And again, our membership program is doing very well. So that's my report tonight, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions about the foundation? Okay, I'm just looking through to see. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So thank you so much for that report. We appreciate it. And now we're going to move on then to public comment. So I want to check with our Madam Secretary. Do we have any public comments this evening?
We do at this time, Chair Obringer. We have Pam Young from the Golden Gate Audubon Society, who is here in the Zoom room, who asked to make a comment.
Okay, great. So I'm looking to see, I thought I saw Pam in here. Has she been brought into the room?
She has been. Pam, can you hear us all right?
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate you giving me a little time to talk tonight, this afternoon. I represent Golden Gate Audubon Society. We're a 2,000 plus member group with we're a 100-year plus chapter, Audubon chapter organization representing the San Francisco Bay and East Bay community. And I want to speak specifically about the issue with trails for mountain bikes. Recently, the mountain bike community requested a new trail to be built along Mizzou Trail in Wildcat Canyon as a bike-only flow trail. Wildcat Canyon is a sensitive habitat that is seasonally occupied by grassland bird species such as western meadowlarks and grasshopper sparrows. Even alltrails.com describes this trail as primarily used for hiking, walking, running, and bird watching. And our eBird reports, which is a community-based bird watching reporting system, routinely documents over 50 bird species in and near the Mizzou Trail. And we really want to alert the PAC tonight that the Park District should consider grassland bird species to be among the most imperiled, which is how they've been described and studied nationally. And this also reflects how imperiled grasslands are in particular. It's the rarest kind of habitat now in the United States. Fewer than 40% of the original 550 million acres of historic grasslands exist today, and Wildcat Canyon reflects very valuable grassland habitat. So anytime there's a new trail, it should be considered premature to just, quite frankly, ad hoc pick a trail based on a special interest stakeholder group asking for a trail to be built. And we urge the PAC to recommend that any consideration for a trail be considered premature until a full trail master plan is in place and until full public review, including a full biological assessments, are undertaken, as the Park District routinely does in a very complete way, always, whether it's an LUP or some system. And we really urge that this not be approached in the way it's being approached right now. And maybe perhaps what could be done is maybe consider a pilot program somewhere on an existing already built trail that maybe could be optimized for mountain bike use and studied for impacts. So I appreciate your time considering my comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering, we have as an upcoming agenda item, information on the trail user working group. So I'm just wondering if that comment that you had, we do have members of the trail user working group here this evening. And so they have received the comment, but also making sure that that comment is passed along to the work group as well as the board, who's going to be looking into this further. So thank you very much, Pam, for your comments tonight. I did want to pause briefly to welcome Bob Simmons. I know that he just joined us, and he is our well, you're not new to the PAC, but you're new to this PAC. So welcome, Bob. And I just wanted to take a moment, if you wanted to say anything, just to introduce yourself before we continue on with the meeting agenda, since we did miss you earlier.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for the welcome, and hi, everyone. And I'm looking forward to serving on the PAC again. I served from 2008 to 2016 when I was on the City Council in Walnut Creek. And now I'm still doing a number of volunteer things, but not in an elected official capacity. And I'm very pleased that Director Lane reached out and asked me to serve on the PAC. And we know each other from some time a few years ago. So, and I was able to listen to the first part of what went on tonight. I was just having trouble logging on because in the transition, I thought I had gotten the Zoom link and I hadn't. And so Eric and Flora helped out and I finally got the Zoom link to sign on. But I look forward to seeing everybody someday in person and as well as on Zoom. So thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. Welcome. So we're continuing on with public comment. So we heard from Pam Young, and I just wanted to see, Madam Secretary, if we have anyone else who wishes to make public comment at this time.
Chair, there is no further public comment at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to close the public comment and move on to item number 6, presentations. So we have we've got as presentation 6A, presentation on the Trail User Working Group that's going to be presented by Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS. So we'll get a report from Brian, and then we'll have the opportunity for some questions following that.
Thank you, Chair Obringer. This is Christina Kelchner, Assistant General Manager of Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development. And I was just going to give a little introduction before I hand it over to our Chief of Planning, Brian Holt. Thank you all very much for allowing us to bring this presentation. We're looking forward to some discussion with you. As this group knows very well, trails are very important at the Park District. And being out on the trails is the #1 way that people engage with our parks. Trails are very popular, and they become even more popular during the last couple of years during the pandemic. And in some of our busiest parks, this can lead to conflicts between trail users and concerns about conflicts between people who are out using the trails in different ways, whether it be hiking, running, mountain biking, or equestrian use, and dogs as well. So this issue is certainly not unique to the East Bay Regional Park District, and it's also not a new issue. And some of you who have been on the PAC for a long time or have served on the PAC in the past, this may feel like deja vu a little bit. It is a conversation that we've been having at the Park District for quite a long time. And one that there may not ultimately be, any magic bullet for. However, as the Park District has grown and the Park District has become more popular and the trails have become busier, it is one that we've been trying to take on a little bit more in the last couple of years. And as the Park District has added new acreage and we have opportunities to open new parks, we particularly, in that case, want to be sure that we're engaging with the community and getting community input and having robust conversations with the community as we plan for those parks. So we are doing a few things at the district to respond to this issue and to the increased public interest in the issue. One is that in our existing parks, we're looking at some pilot programs to test out some operational controls. In some of our existing parks, that's in the early stages, you'll be hearing more about that, but things like one-way controls or certain days of the week for certain users, that's one issue that we are considering. And then as Pam Young mentioned, we are considering a proposal for a new separated bike optimized trail in Wildcat Park. So you'll be hearing more about that. It's, again, very early stages. And as I said, as we're acquiring new parklands, we're really trying to be sure that we're engaging with all of the community members early and often. And in, I think it was 2019, we did have a board workshop that was about planning for new trails and new parks. And one of the outcomes of that workshop was that we put together a trail user working group. And one of the goals of that working group was to bring together many voices so that we could add to the number of voices and the variety of voices that we're hearing from at the Park District. And the trail user working group was really designed to be a listening exercise so that staff could be listening to the interests of different user groups and so that the user groups could be listening to each other. So the Park District did hire a facilitator, and then the user groups really managed that conversation themselves and really had an opportunity to hear from each other. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian to give you an update on kind of what we've heard and what we think some next steps might be. Thanks.
Thank you, Christina, and good afternoon, Chair Obringer and members of the committee. I'm going to run through a brief presentation here for you and then dive right into it. I do want to acknowledge Pam Young, who has been one of our trail user working group members, and her comments, which we have heard and which I think are illustrative of some of the comments that we have received over the years and will continue to receive as we receive these, and really kind of gets at sort of the heart of the question around some of our trails planning. So I'll dive into this. I am joined today with Sean Dugan, who's our Trails Program Manager, and Devin Reef, our Principal Planner, who've done a lot of the heavy lifting on facilitating this work. And Sean's an expert in trail design and trail planning, and have both been very engaged in doing a lot of good community engagement around this. So just the purpose of the Trail User Working Group. I think Christina kind of described this, but it was sort of how we can plan for new trails and new parklands. We've received a lot of comments regarding trail conflict, and certainly we understand that there are instances of trail conflict, and we also understand that there's instances of sort of perceived trail conflict, and really trying to understand sort of what is the real occurrence of trail conflict that's occurring out in our parks. We did want to understand the interest of all our trail users. Certainly, we do hear often from our friends and stakeholders in the environmental community. We hear often from our friends and stakeholders in the mountain biking community and the equestrian community, but we really wanted to be sure that we're hearing from all of our trail users. And really all of this is about how do we facilitate sustainable trail development and resource protection. I'm really guided by the sort of philosophy that the best protection for our natural resources is a sustainable trail network that users want to use, that they don't feel compelled to go out and build their own trails or to ride off trails, so that we're providing the facilities that our users wish to use and the experiences that they seek within our parks, and that we're protecting the natural resources that we're obligated to protect and that we so cherish. So we're guided by a couple of policies in our master plan that really kind of have driven some of this conversation. We have the policy that states the district will expand its unpaved multi-use trail system as additional acreage and new parks are added. And the district will continue to provide multi-use trails to link parks and to provide access to park visit destinations. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of our parks have both roads and trails within them. Roads are those facilities that are generally wider than 8 feet in width, are used for emergency vehicle access or grazing access. So generally they can accommodate vehicle use. And they may also accommodate recreational use, and they're used as trails. But then we also have what are commonly referred to as trails. These are sort of purpose-built recreation experiences, generally under 8 feet in width. And 8 feet is sort of an important marker because that's what under our ordinance, Ordinance 38, designates that trails under 8 feet in width, that mountain bikes are generally not permitted on those unless an exception is made. And then we also have the master plan policy that trails will be designed and designated to accommodate either single or multiple users as appropriate based on location, recreation intensity, environmental, and safety considerations. So this really guides a lot of our planning as we go through and identify trail design, location, demand, of course, the environmental review, and understanding the safety considerations. So just for a little bit of context, so the district since 1995, we've been very successful in acquiring new lands. We've acquired over 57,000 acres, but we have not been as successful in constructing new trails. We've only constructed 13 miles of new trails, and the majority of that has been within one regional park, Crockett Hills. So really the question was, okay, how can we advance developing new trails within that land bank or that new parkland? So as Christina mentioned, following up on our board workshop in October 2019, the board directed staff to really get all the trail users together and discuss our trail network and discuss their perspectives. We took what I like to call sort of the Noah's Ark approach and sort of identified, 2 people from each of the categories that we identified and invited them to join this group. So we had bicyclists, we had members of the conservation community, dog owners, equestrians. We did have hiking groups that joined. We had our land trust partners, and we had some regional organizations such as the Bay Area Ridge Trail, who we often work with. We felt it important to engage with youth and have them involved here. Also with the disabled community to understand the disabled user perspective. We had members of our park advisory committee. Rick Rickard joined us, as well as former committee members Adela Ho and Michael Gregory. We had members from our multicultural advisory committee, from other groups such as Outdoor Afro, and then members from our Regional Parks Foundation. So we really tried to get the whole sort of solar system of our trail users, which is obviously a challenge, managing public input with a group of this size. And of course, lots of people identify as multiple trail users. They might be a mountain biker and a member of the Sierra Club, or they may be a hiker and equestrian, or so certainly none of these groups are monolithic. They occupy many different spaces. So what did we do? Well, this was all going on during COVID, right? So we had the benefit of facilitating this group via Zoom, and I will say, it's a challenge. Fortunately, we were able to continue doing it. Certainly would have liked to have gotten together and actually gone on the ground and looked at some of these sites, but ultimately Zoom worked. We met 7 times between August 2020 and August 21st. We heard all the different user perspectives. We set up each meeting to kind of have a focused conversation on sort of what the interests of dog walkers are, or the interests of mountain bikers, or the conservation interests that are there. There was a lot of discussion and good debates over what potential solutions are. We have developed a draft report that the group reviewed and that we will be finalizing. And this report is really going to be a synthesis of just all the input that we've received. We've taken copious notes and engaged in breakout rooms, and everything has been recorded and posted on the website. So it's available to everybody. And like I say, we have all the notes and minutes from the meetings that are going to be in these reports. So our hope is that wherever this conversation goes from here, this will be a pretty comprehensive record of the input that we've received throughout this process. We also conducted some polling just for some different strategies from the group to understand what sort of tactics would get support or non-support in terms of how we address this, how we address our trails moving forward. So that'll be included in the report as well. So just sort of a summary of what we heard. Overall, I think we heard just a sense of a desire for predictability on our trails. Understanding if you are going out and hiking on a trail that is supposed to be hiker only, that you won't necessarily encounter a bicycle, and And same thing for the bicycling community. They want to know where they are permitted to ride, and that they have some legal options to be able to pursue. I think generally, and who can argue with the desire for access for all, we're a public agency and need to serve all of our constituents, so a real interest in providing access for all. But specific interest in addressing the needs and interests of seniors, of youth. Of course, we're all interested and tuned to the needs of the BIPOC community and social equity in our parks, making sure people feel safe and welcome in our parks. The interests of the disabled community. I think we had somebody who sort of made the comment that anything that we do for the disabled community really serves everybody in our parks and makes it better for all. And then, with COVID, we have experienced a lot of new trail users. These are people who haven't necessarily grown up or aren't used to being on our trails, maybe don't necessarily have the same trail etiquette or experience, and sort of need to address some of their interests. Like I say, there was an interest in operation strategies, so utilizing some of those tools like one-way directional trails or single-use trails, or perhaps alternating days, exploring some of those things. There was a general interest in trail user education, educating people on how to recreate safely on our trails, also about the natural resource concerns, how to be good to the earth as we're on the trails. There was certainly interest amongst certain trail use working group members about trail enforcement and the need for more trail enforcement, and how enforcing the park district's regulations on the trails. Recognition of the importance of designing features that people want to use and that are sustainable, features that keep people on the trails rather than creating social trails and bootleg trails. Of course, the need to fully understand the environmental impacts of trails, and the park district does fully evaluate the environmental impacts of trails. So the need to continue to do that, and the need to communicate that in a transparent and public process, so that people feel fully engaged in our trail decisions. And we heard lots of other decisions too, so very robust conversation. But as I say, the conversation's not over. There is a need to dive in really to what is sort of the crux of the issue. And I think Pam got to it, is conflicts between mountain biking and concerns for natural resource protection. So really a basic question of, do bikes belong on natural surface trails in the park district? Some of these other questions about closing gaps in the regional trail network. These are regional trail networks that we work with partners across the region, regional trail networks that go around the Bay Area Ridge Trail, where there may be some areas of the Bay Area Ridge Trail that are open to bikes, and questions about whether in the East Bay, if that's suitable within our system. Again, there is a growing demand that we've seen for mountain bike accessible trails, and we continue to see that growth, and we also continue to see the growth of sort of user created trails, and trying to address that demand in a way that would create or provide a disincentive from those user created trails. Certainly heard a need for additional discussion around protecting access for equestrians, because of course equestrians have a lot of concerns around mountain bike access on trails, and how to continue to protect equestrian access. I mentioned the operational controls, transparent and public process. And then this was all focused on how to expand trails within new parklands. But we can't talk about trails in new parklands without issues of our existing parklands coming up. That's just natural. So there was a lot of interest in addressing our existing trails in our currently open parklands, and that's really there's a lot to talk about there. So some of the upcoming projects where these these questions, these conversations are going to be part of the dialogue, and are going to be coming to the PAC. Is at the Roddy Ranch Golf Course Public Access and Restoration Plan. This is where we're converting a former golf course with existing cart paths and converting those over to trails. The Southern Lost Trumpets Land Use Plan. This is a plan that would add some 700 acres to Southern Lost Trumpets and connect Danville and San Ramon to that park. That plan does include some narrow trails that are going to be proposed for multi-use for very practical reasons. They're proposed for that, but that will be part of the discussion around that land use plan, and we know there's going to be concerns about that. Throughout the trail user working group process, there was a lot of requests and suggestions that staff began looking at some pilot projects within some of our busier parks, or like Briones Regional Park, where Briones happens to be a park where there is a lot of mountain bike use, there's a lot of equestrian use, there's a lot of informal or user created trails within there. We do get a lot of reports around trails conflicts there. And we just thought, there might be some opportunity to explore some pilot projects that could address those in partnership with the cycling community, the environmental community, and the equestrian and hiking community. We heard earlier about concerns about the Wildcat Flow Trail. So that is a proposal that has come forward from the community as a facility that would serve a need for a lot of the high school mountain biking groups that use some of those trails. They've made the argument that would potentially provide for a safer hiking experience within some of the existing trails within Wildcat, but we know there's also environmental concerns there. So of course, we would need to do all of the environmental studies on that. That's a proposal that has come forward. And then our public affairs team is moving forward with a trail user education campaign throughout the park district. So these are going to be conversations that the PAC is going to be engaged in throughout this coming year, in addition to the work that the trail user working group is doing. So our next steps. We're hoping to wrap up the trail user working group. We've got the final meeting on February 7th. And we're really appreciative of the trail user working group. They've just been very generous of their time, very forthcoming with their comments. But like I say, we know the conversation isn't over yet. So we are going to bring this to the board executive committee. And at that, we are going to engage the executive committee in a discussion of sort of what the next steps are and where this conversation should go. I do know the PAC has had on their work plan for quite some time to have the conversation about mountain biking in parks and other things. So, so we're discussing the potential for the PAC to sort of pick up some of this work and to answer some fairly specific questions that staff would need to really tee up and frame up for the PAC to discuss that gets at some of these issues. Again, we're going to put together this summary report that will be made available to the public. And as I mentioned, everything that has occurred through the Trail User Working Group and all of the videos and recordings and all the meeting minutes and everything else is posted on our website, eastbayparks.org/Trail User Working Group. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions, but I'll hand it over to Christina to close us out here, and thank you very much.
Brian, so as you can see, a lot to talk about here, a lot to think about. We do plan to bring this, as Brian said, to the board executive committee on February 11th, in the hopes that the board will provide some direction about the next steps. And we have talked about, and there's been some board interest in having the PAC take on some of these questions and some of these issues. So part of that would be, and maybe what we can have some discussion about and input on tonight, and then more at the board executive committee, is what would the scope of that ask be for the PAC? It's a large body of questions. And so we have some work to do to refine exactly what that would look like if the PAC were to take that on. So I'd like to ask Director Lane if she has any input, any comments to to add before we turn it over to the PAC members for comment?
The board has been watching the working group, on and off for a couple of years. And I think we're all aware of what a significant part of our parks trails are. And we also know that in terms of trail conflict, it's quagmire. There are people who feel really strongly one way or the other. And I'm hoping that some of those people were in the working group and were able to listen to other people. But we did in the master plan make the commitment to try and accommodate all trail users. And that doesn't mean all trail users on all trails, as we know. So I think it's important for the board to have a chance to talk about what direction we should go next. The executive committee is a logical place to have that conversation. And one of the things we are talking about is involving the PAC in a major way, because you are our lead public advisory group, and following the next steps on the trail user working group. So I guess today I'm interested in hearing from people about, do you want to get more involved in this? It is on your, this issue of trail use is on your work plan, and it's a consistent one because of its significance.
You're still muted, Chair Obringer.
Whoops, thank you. Thank you very much, Director Lane. So I'm happy to facilitate the questions. And I just want to clarify, I have heard in speaking with Eric Bueller before the meeting, and I think again, the invitation from Director Lane as well as Christina, that we will have the opportunity as the PAC to discuss this more in upcoming meetings and tackle this further. So this isn't the end of the conversation. So we'll start with Igor, please.
Good evening. First of all, I want to say I think this approach you have with the working group, the inclusive and the reaching out to involving the community is an excellent approach, and I'm fully supportive of that. And I'm very hopeful that it's all going to go well and reach some of these resolutions that otherwise would probably be unavailable to us. I have a couple of fairly specific questions. One of them has to do with membership in the working group. I didn't see membership by the Bay Trail organization, and a large number, and probably quite a few miles of the trail that East Bay Parks is engaged with is part of the Bay Trail. And I would think that that would be a really important partner to include in this conversation. And the other one is more general. I noticed that there's one group I noticed in there that looked like it was a diversity-oriented group as a member. I think that's great. I think that aspect of public involvement and using public facilities and public assets is kind of the growth industry in that area, and that I would really encourage the user group, the working group, to make a really strong effort to make sure that members of the diversity coalition realize that's a hard group to define, but are included and engaged in the process that you have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll answer your first question first. So why the Bay Trail was involved. So this effort was very focused on the natural surface trails. So the Bay Trail is largely a paved trail along the shoreline. So this was much more focused on the internal sort of park trails. So that's why the Bay Trail wasn't engaged in there, but we did have their sort of counterpart, which is the Bay Area Ridge Trail. They were involved. And to your second point, yes, we were very concerned going into this that we didn't just hear from the same voices. Like I said, we've had many conversations over the years with the mountain biking community, with the equestrian community, with the environmental community. And we really wanted to make sure that we did do the outreach to other organizations such as Outdoor Afro, to Civic Corps, to like I say, the disabled groups, and to have them at the table so that we could have that conversation. And it was really good. I think, we could always be better in that. And I think moving forward, I think that needs to be a focus of all of our community engagement. But we did really try to make a concerted effort.
Well, thank you for that response. I think that trails, even more than parks, are integral to the communities, that they reach into almost walking past people's backyards and through neighborhoods and so on. And so it's even more important, I think, for trails to reflect the diverse community than it is for parks, although that's also very important. So I thank you for your efforts on that. I'm very optimistic and very much want to cheer you on.
Thank you very much. Let's move on next to Roland.
Thank you. And I would agree with Igor that I think this process is excellent, and I hope that it's going to net some really, really good results. I had a couple of questions and comments. I guess the first question I had was, there's been a lot of mention of the mountain bike community, and there's really a split there. I ride my mountain bike. Mountain biking, in my opinion, does not have a motor. And I want to understand how we are addressing that, because I know that motorized vehicles aren't allowed on trails. I remember having this conversation a long time ago when Segways had first come on the scene and they were showing up on the Iron Horse Trail. So that tells you how old I am. But I would just say I'm very intrigued with this process. I guess one of the other questions, just kind of at the heart of it, are mountain bikes, how does the district actually perceive mountain bikes? Are they a necessary evil because people like to engage in the park that way? Are they a welcomed user of the park districts? I have to say, a lot of times when I hear verbiage, it sounds like it's more of the former than the latter. And so hopefully that's not the message that's being sent.
Actually, I would ask Director Lane if she'd like to respond to that before staff does.
Well, I think for me, it's all users. And we continue to, well, it's illegal to drive your motorized bike. And we are seeing, of course, electric bikes increasingly in the parks because they are permitted on the paved trails. And I guess in terms of welcoming, it depends on who you talk to. And I don't know that I can say more beyond that. People have different opinions for sure about mountain bikes. Park District did very well in those first decades when mountain bikes began, because it was a nightmare in Marin. And the Park District put together a trail group that included the different modes of trail at that point, and that helped to ease that transition in the East Bay, which was not the case in the North Bay. So I like to think that the Park District is is there to listen and try to accommodate our users outside of motorized ones. Maybe I'm Pollyanna. No, could be.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to Irene.
Hi, everyone. I would also like to thank the Park District for all the work that they put into this and the people who volunteered to participate. And for the record, I would encourage that this issue come back to the PAC as long as you're asking. And but I think what's really important that the PAC have a narrow focus, and that would be on the part that the board needs help with, which is probably the controversial parts. So we don't need to take the entire thing that everybody agrees on, but perhaps the things that are a little bit more dicey that maybe we can be of assistance with. I imagine that might be, you know, having certain one-way trails or, you know, certain days for people to only be allowed to use a trail. Those are just the things that I think were probably what maybe we can be helpful with. And I'm glad to hear that there is one more meeting of the user group, because I was under the understanding that a lot of what this working group was put together for was there was one major issue of contention, and that was narrow trails for multi-use. And I'm hoping that this whole group of people that were there could come to a meeting of the minds, or at least really focus on that particular issue, because that's where the entire controversy was. It wasn't on multi-use around the park and access for all. It really was centered around multi-use on narrow trails. So if hikers are on a narrow trail, that they wouldn't have to get off the trail to allow a bike to come by or whatever. So my feedback is I hope in the last final meeting that there could be a lot of focus in terms of that. So when you come back to us, we have some feedback from the group of what they agree on and maybe perhaps what they don't agree on. So that's my 2 cents. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And Bob.
Yes, thank you. And I would also encourage the board to have this come back to the PAC, or come to the PAC for its consideration and discussion. I have 2 questions for Brian. They're somewhat related, but they are different. The first deals with, you have similar trail user issues on your paved trails as well, using the Iron Horse specifically. Did you draw any lessons from dealing with those interactions that were not always positive on the paved trails as you approach this? The second deals more with the trail users working group. In my experience in hiking, I'm going to make a generalization. The hikers and the equestrians tend to be the older demographic, and the mountain bikers tend to be a much younger demographic. I was out hiking in China Camp State Park on the weekend, and there were some middle school groups that were coming through, you know, with parents, but it was really good to see. But I kind of, you know, has there been a recognition discussion within the trail user working group of the impact of what we do on the different demographic communities that use the trails in different ways?
Yeah, I think, you know, we did try to keep this conversation focused, and I'll kind of respond to Committee Member Dieter's points. We did try to keep this very focused on just that question of trail use on narrow natural surface trails. So we didn't delve into a lot of the paved use issues. I'd imagine there are some parallels there and some similar comments that would happen regarding, bike access or dogs and, all those sorts of things. We're all humans sharing the same public space, right? So there's sort of things that happen in that situation. And then with regards to some of the age demographics, we didn't necessarily get into that super detailed, but I will just make a comment that we are increasingly hearing from older and older folks who are mountain biking. And I will say the folks who have sort of advocated for the Wildcat Flow Trail are retired senior citizens. So it's I think traditionally that's the sort of senses that, and we do hear a lot from the high school kids who are out mountain biking with their high school mountain bike teams. But we have increasingly heard from sort of older folks on mountain bikes as well. So it would be interesting to dive into those demographics. It wasn't something that we had the ability to do as part of this, but I think it would be really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we have Neil and then Rochelle.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for that really informative presentation. That was really helpful. So my question is really more of a process one. So, it seems like one of the real strengths of this working group was getting everybody together in the same room from different backgrounds. And I think that's revealed by one of the things you said, perceived conflicts. I think one of the, things that I've heard from multiple people coming out of this working group is that when you get them together in a room, people realize that they have a lot in common, and it's much easier to sort of come to a consensus when people are face-to-face talking to each other or through Zoom these days. And I recall from the dog policy sort of revisit a few years ago that there was a similar procedure where all the different sort of stakeholders, got together and hashed out their differences, and that went really well. And so I know that this was sort of a limited term engagement, but I was wondering, for trails in particular, these issues aren't going to go away in the future. And I was wondering if there's some plan to continue some sort of working group like this in the future, or is it something that will be more of a pop-up to deal with particular issues and then, like I said, be sort of a more limited term thing? Because I think there's a lot of utility in having ongoing conversations among representatives of these different stakeholder groups, and probably a good way to avert, disagreements escalating early on in the process.
Brian, I'll take that one, and you can add. Yeah, thank you, Neil. Those are wonderful comments, and all of the comments have been just very helpful. I'm taking copious notes here. So I would say that no decision has been made about whether to continue on this kind of a multi-voice group. I agree with you, and we all agree that this has been a really helpful process and is essential to having to reaching resolution and brainstorming and being able to come together around some things to try. So there certainly is interest by the Park District to continue a group like this. I think that's one of the questions that if the PAC is interested in taking this up and the board gives that direction, that's one of the things that we would put to the PAC is what might that look like in the future, and get some recommendations from the PAC about how to do that. But certainly we're interested, and we agree with your comments that it's about getting all the people together in a room, even if it's a Zoom room, and realizing that a lot of the perceived conflicts, are what we hear about, but actually people have a lot of similar interests. Everybody wants to be out there on the trail, enjoying the parks and enjoying nature, and to find that common ground and focus on that can lead to finding resolutions that may not have been obvious from the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then Rochelle.
Yeah.
I don't know if my internet connection's unstable. I was acknowledging Rochelle.
Okay. Yeah, no, I heard. Thank you. I have definitely heard that the Park District had announced that all of its new narrow trails would be multi-use. Is that correct? And if so,
that is incorrect, Rochelle.
It's incorrect.
It is incorrect. We never made any. I'm not exactly sure where that narrative came from. I think there was a bit of messaging that may have been happening with that, but the Park District has never proposed to open up all of our narrow trails for multi-use.
Okay, good. I would echo what a lot of others have said. First of all, appreciation for everybody's hard work on this. It does sound like it's a really constructive way to proceed, and would love to see the PAC play a constructive role here if we can help resolve any of these, these kinds of issues. I think it would be really great. Thank you.
Great. So I don't see any other hands up. I just had one.
Rick has his hand up.
I'm sorry, Rick. I'm sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
Thank you. I won't take much time, but I just want to mention briefly that as Brian said, I served along with Adela and Michael on the working group, and the two of them have now gone off of the PAC, but I think that they are both planning to attend the February 7th meeting, and just want to make sure that the group is aware that that's going on. It's not to exclude current members, but it's really to include them because they've been involved in the process all along. And certainly, I think it will come back to the PAC, it looks like, and others who are interested in getting involved at that point. But I wanted to let you know that the three of us will be involved on February 7th.
Thank you for sharing. And that's good to know that institutional knowledge, that we're not going to lose that as folks transition off the PAC. And I did just want to check, I saw the list of new parks that were being included, and just, I'm going to ask, I didn't see the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. And so I was just wondering, is that, is that going to be included as well at some point?
Well, we do have an adopted land use plan for that. So there's not an action that's going to be coming forward for that. We're just looking towards implementing our plans there. But certainly as we start to open up trails, it'll be the same sorts of conversations will be happening out there.
Got it. Thank you. Well, this was very informative, and I think that you have heard overwhelming interest in continuing to be engaged on this topic. So we look forward to this coming back to the PAC with areas of focus for us to dig into and provide our feedback. So thank you very much. And is this an item, do I need to open this up to public comment to see if there's anyone from the public who wants to weigh in on this? Okay, I guess not. Well, with that, then we are going to continue on. Thank you so much again for the presentation. And so we're going to move on to our next item, 6B, legislative program overview for 2022. And we're going to be hearing from Eric Fuller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs.
Yeah, thank you, Eric Fuller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, and I have my colleague Lisa Baldinger, our Management Analyst in the Government Affairs Department, joining for this presentation. And I want to give credit to her for helping develop the program overview that we'll be showing tonight. Really, this was a result of our new general manager, just as we're reimagining the PAC's work, wanted to put some structure around our legislative program and have it a little more robust and driven by the board and staff. And so with that in mind, I think we do have a PowerPoint to share. Great, thank you. And we can go to the first slide because I know we're a little bit pressed for time, and just wanted to iterate that the Park District, in somewhat of a unique way, has had a legislative focus since its inception in the 30s, and throughout its history has been very active in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. And I did want to also acknowledge Director Lane here in the beginning, who had commented on this presentation that we brought before Ledge Committee, and we were a little bit more in depth there, but we'll try to move through it here. So our program is aligning funding and policy with need, meaning district projects or support for district staff, other things that need funding or policy advocacy. We align what the district is looking to do with our legislative leaders, primarily in Washington and in Sacramento. Next slide, please. And then with keeping in mind always our vision, mission, master plan, and then we have some key elements to our work that are very important from just a yearly planning standpoint. We do track and monitor legislation and policy decisions. And most importantly, I think in that work is really to recognize trends. Some are obvious, like wildfire funding, but some are less obvious, like the fact that there's been multiple bills introduced on a conservation corps and reestablishing them in the last year or so since COVID hit. And that's an emerging body of work. Then we also play a role in maintaining our working relationships with our elected leaders and the staff. Staff is very important to continue to have an open line of communication with. We do engage in site visits and actually at least twice a year, we just have a courtesy visit with staff to make sure that we continue to have that communication. And then the other key element of our work is really the research and community engagement that we work on. We are involved in several other agencies like California Special District Association, California Park and Recreation Society. We serve on those legislative committees. And then in our research realm, a lot of it is polling and survey work. But there are other elements, just such as we did a Beacon Economics report a few years ago. That was something that we use in our advocacy. So the research supports our work when we go to meet with our electeds and their staff. And then our scope of control, is more external. Obviously, it's our board members. As you can read here, 8 federal legislative offices, 11 state offices, and 10 county supervisors. And then we have 180 city council members within the 33 towns and cities in the East Bay. And then on top of that, which is not listed here, is all the special districts that we interface with and their elected staffs. So it's a pretty broad external group of people that we work with. And with that, I will hand it over to Lisa to talk about our identified priorities.
Thank you. So as Eric shared, we have a lot of relationships that we're building, a lot of different changing elements at a state, federal, and local level. And so we really wanted to put some structure around our department as it's growing and welcome Flora to our team. And so we broke it down into 7 key issue areas. And then I really want to highlight that within each area, we have focus on items like land acquisition, climate change adaptation and mitigation falls across these areas. They're all striving to align with our master plan and vision. And so the 7 areas that we'll dive into today are on the screen, and we'll talk a little bit about each and every one of them and how they align with our state and federal priorities going into our upcoming advocacy visits with our board of directors. So within the document, and as Director Lane shared, it is not a quick read. It's about up to about 37 pages. We have in each section how it aligns with the Park District's mission, vision, and values, what our specific advocacy goals are, as well as we're working on a succinct 1 sentence. So if you only want to read 7 sentences, you'll still get a gist of what the document's about. And thank you, Director Lane, for that suggestion. We share the relevant scientific survey data. So as Eric noted, we conduct on average about 2 scientific surveys every year. And so we'll be documenting how it aligns with each issue area. So if we do a survey on wildfire, we will always update that wildfire section in the document to reflect that survey data. We in government affairs cannot operate in a silo. We are absolutely dependent and committed to our cross-divisional partners here at the Park District. They are our subject matter experts who can come and testify in Sacramento, lend their opinion to a bill that we're reviewing. So we really want to highlight our partners in this work internally, and what current projects and programs are we in government affairs, as well as our cross-divisional partners working on that align with these issue areas. We'll be tracking the state and federal funding and policy programs that align with these areas. So we can have it on hand if somebody says, gee, it looks like you have a lot of great projects on X, Y, and Z. What current programs have been working with you? What's been going well? Where do programs not exist? We have that documented well. We have our external partners across the region in terms of who have we partnered with historically on the different issue areas. And then the last three items are the areas that we'll really be updating regularly. So we have our 2021 and 2022 board supported legislation. So our legislative committee reviews a series of bills. And so we'll be aligning it with our different program areas. We have our events that occur. We do about 2 per month. So we have site visits, walk and talks with elected officials, press events, and we'll be putting those into the relevant sections. And then our 2022 member funding request, which we're going to discuss today. And really want to emphasize that this is intended to be a living document, a document that develops with our team, that documents our team's work, and that can be used to help folks get an understanding of what our work is and how it aligns with the district overall mission. So for the first one we're going to dive into is wildfire resilience. So wildfire has been a pretty front and center topic, especially at a state level here in California. Response, we do have a fire department that we regularly remind our delegation of, but additionally, we see wildfire as so much more. So we have the vegetation management, we have the ecologically sensitive vegetation management. So this is an area that doesn't have a lot of state or federal funding, but we talk about it regularly with our delegation, that if we're able to not only remove the potentially flammable vegetation, but reestablish native fire tolerant vegetation, that makes that area just that much more resilient should a fire break out. We also see wildfire as an opportunity to support jobs such as an State Conservation Corps forestry crew, and it's also where it ties into our grazing program, so not just for forests, but also our grasslands. So with that in mind, we are moving forward with a state and a federal request this year for funding. At a state level, we're requesting from our full delegation $8 million for wildfire mitigation for safe, healthy forests in our East Bay communities. This is really focused at the stewardship elements, and to be in complement, $10 million we were able to secure in the 2021 budget. So that $10 million is going towards vegetation removal, and what we'd like to use with this $8 million is to go back in and establish those fire tolerant native forests and ecosystems. At a federal level, we are bringing forward a request to Senator Alex Padilla for $10 million for wildfire mitigation. This is also an opportunity to speak with the senator's office about the programs at the federal level that have worked really well for the Park District in the past. So there's the FEMA BRIC program, HMGP. And so we also leverage these opportunities to share what grant programs we've successfully applied for and been able to secure historically.
And then another very high priority for the district is what we do on our shorelines. Currently, we manage 55 miles of shoreline, and obviously with sea level rise and storm surges and king tides, there's a lot of exposure to our property, and we're constantly maintaining and putting resources into protecting those shorelines. And the challenge we face is we are doing it pretty much on our own. So we do need to begin working with state and local and federal even governments and other agencies to ensure that we have a holistic approach to mitigation and adaptation along the shoreline. And another way that we can also build resiliency is to really have forward-thinking projects like our Dotson Family Marsh and what we're about to do in the Hayward Shoreline that over time retreat as the sea level rises. And then with regard to some of the asks that we are making this year, and this isn't actually all of them that deal with shoreline properties, but these are the two main ones for sea level rise, which are Coyote Hills Restoration Project. The part of the park there is being designed as a a bit of a climate demonstration project with interpretive signage. And so we're asking Senator Wachowski for $6.5 million for that project. Also, it will improve access and make it safer to enter the park. Hayward Marsh, we have an area where the Union Sanitary District used to use for freshwater discharge, and they no longer are using that. So now we have some brackish water that we need to restore the habitat because there's a least tern colony and other flora and fauna on that shoreline. So we're asking Assemblymember Quirk for $5 million for that work. And then at the federal level, again, Representative Rocana asking $3 million for the Coyote Hills project. And then overall ask to work on the shoreline holistically is with Senator Feinstein of $11 million. And she has had a history of supporting Bay Area restoration throughout her career. So we're hopeful.
Next up, and this has been something so very heightened and central to our work for the past 2 years, but even before then, is our community health advocacy. So this is focused at creating space for all East Bay residents and really centering equity can have access to parks for the physical and psychological benefits. This is around creating facilities that are welcoming to all visitors, ensuring a sense of belonging. It's also an opportunity for us to really highlight some of the wonderful programs of the park district, such as park prescriptions of prescribing time outside for health, and hoping to partner with health agencies as well as elected officials who are advocates for health across the East Bay. Our 2 member asks at a state level that are really centering this access and creating expanded space for healthful recreation and enjoyment of park are one for Senator Skinner for $5 million for Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Shoreline. As Eric commented on the sea level rise section, we have a number of projects that also have a sea level rise nexus. And these 7 categories are not just bucketed separately. They have a lot of overlap, which is wonderful, and they're in complement. And so the MLK project, this is encompassing the Doolittle Trail expansion, improvements by the Martin Luther King Shoreline Center, as well as what's been called the Tidewater Expansion Project over by the Tidewater Recreation Facility. So it's a high-level view of the park, really bringing all of that work together. With Assemblymember Buffy Wicks, we were honored to host her at Miller Knox Regional Shoreline recently to discuss our wildfire management plans. But while there, we also had the opportunity to share with her what a important component Miller Knox is to the Richmond community. And so the Habitat Restoration and Recreational Amenities Improvement Project is a bird's eye view looking at some pond restoration, the Keller Beach improvements, and overall Bay Trail extension within the Miller Knox Regional Shoreline.
And then on ecosystem stewardship, Lisa mentioned earlier on the wildfire section to reestablish forests that are more fire resilient and more natural. And that's a body of work that we're really seeing some trends on in Sacramento and elsewhere in terms of really what is a sustainable environment and ecosystem, and how do we best plan for the future when we know that the climate is going to be changing. And then also with, especially at the state level, the regulatory permitting for these types of restoration projects and cutting the green tape is really something that we've been focused on because currently we often get treated, when we're doing a major restoration project, $13-14 million, we get treated the same as somebody who's building a hospital from a regulatory standpoint. And it really is a different kind of work. And we are involved in some coalitions to try to make sure that our work on stewardship and natural environmental health is seen as part of the solution to climate change, and that we are a big part of that. And so with that in mind, we have a park up sort of near Martinez, Waterbird Regional Preserve. It's again, similar to the Hayward area. It's a marsh that used to have a constant flow of fresh water that has not been occurring in recent times. And so we want to look at funding for best practices to restore that preserve, and it's an important flyway. So we really want to understand it and improve. So it's $1 million to help us get a better game plan written up to take on restoration of that park.
All right, as Eric mentioned earlier, in 2020, we conducted the Beacon with Beacon Economics, a jobs report about how our large infrastructure projects can support jobs throughout the region, businesses, and have an overall kind of a ripple effect in terms of material jobs and others. And so with that report in hand, we're able to really center green jobs in our advocacy and share how our large multi-benefit infrastructure projects also have the benefit of increasing jobs for the community. Another key job area is support for the Conservation Corps, whether that be the Student Conservation Association, the California Conservation Corps, local civic corps, or others. These are great places for employment, but also for career ladders leading into jobs at the Park District or park champions and environmentalists outside the Park District. So really important to our work. And with that in mind, we have been in conversations with the California Conservation Corps about some permanent East Bay crew facilities. And Assemblymember Bauer Cahan has expressed support for this. So we're bringing forward a request of $8 million to support the infrastructure of those permanent facilities to allow East Bay conservation crews to be based out of our region.
And we've also, through our research and polling and just frankly, general feedback from the public to our staff and in general, learned that the most important way to make folks want to come back to your park is make them have a comfortable and safe experience on their first visit. And so this idea of having welcoming visitor use facilities is really paramount in our thinking and in terms of asking for funding for improved projects, for maintenance, for innovative technologies. We've learned through some of our polling that water bottle filling stations and hand washing facilities are really important to people, so we can then turn around and advocate with our electeds for funding for those kinds of, or look to a ballot measure for those kinds of amenities. And we also want to make sure everything's accessible to ADA and to folks with visual and hearing challenges. So really trying to make sure that our parks are welcoming and everybody has access and is able to experience a safe park. And so with that in mind, we're asking a number of asks here. The Camp Arroyo project is really a very unique one. That facility is a camp for children. Some of the participants are children that are physically challenged and will be challenged health-wise. And so we want to make sure that the camp can stay open even in a downed power line or a PG&E shutoff. So we're asking for a solar panel and green energy project to make sure that the kitchen can stay open even if the power goes down. Assemblymember Bauer Cahan has been to the kitchen in the facility, and we're asking her for a $2 million ask for that facility. On Robert W. Crown Beach, asking our newest Assemblymember Mia Bonta for $4 million for improvements. There's a number of issues there, both with the shoreline and sand erosion and cycling out some of the older restrooms. And also we have some improvements to make in the Crab Cove area and eventually in the GSA property across the street from Crab Cove. For Assemblymember Grayson, we're asking $3 million for the first entrance to Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. This would be a site south of Bailey Road where we think we can build a small staging area and have public access in the not too distant future for that park, or at least that part of that park. And then at the federal level, we worked with Representative DeSaulnier this year for a $10 million budget request from the National Park Service for the Visitor Center to be established at Thurgood Marshall. And we did get a little ways with it, but we're going to have to re-engage next year, and we'll be I guess it's not this year, and we'll be re-engaging with that $10 million request.
All right. And then in terms of access, it's a sense of belonging in the park, but it's also getting to our parks. And so we're really centering climate-friendly transportation. And we were intentional to ensure that this could include transportation such as our Parks Express program, public transportation in partnership with BART or AC Transit, and then our active transportation. So our Iron Horse Trail, Bay Trail, which can serve as connections to transit stations, employment centers, or our park land. So making sure folks have a safe, meaningful, and climate-friendly means to get to the parks to enjoy the recreation. And in complement to this, we are bringing forward some of our asks that were previously submitted within our RAISE package in 2021. And so for Representative McNerney, we'll be bringing forward a continued discussion about the Marsh Creek Trail extension. So this is a 3-mile extension to connect to Marsh Creek State Park. With Representative Lee, our Oakland Bay Trail extensions. This is both a potential construction as well as a planning project. So for planning, it would be from the High Street Bridge to the Tidewater Recreation Center at Martin Luther King Jr. Regional Park. That needs some design work and scoping. And then for construction, it would be our what's known as our Crowley property. So a connection from Fruitvale along the Oakland shoreline. With Representative Thompson, Richmond Bay Trail extension, commonly known as our Point Wilson extension, a $6 million project. And then with Representative Swalwell, Tassajara Creek Trail extension to the Dublin Pleasanton BART is a combination of a paved as well as a natural surface trail that could connect communities to the local BART station. And so that concludes our overview of the 7 key issue areas and our 2022 member asks. In addition, as Director Lane shared earlier, we have an overview of the history of government affairs and the role that policy has taken at the Park District beginning in the 1930s with women's group advocating for our creation in both the legislature and then on the ballot. We have the significant accomplishments of the Government Affairs Department. Some highlights from the recent years include $13.5 million in 2021 budget requests and the passage of Measure FF, which over its lifetime will bring in over $66 million for the Park District. We include a graph of our 2022 state member requests, which we share with you all today. And then the Government Affairs 2022 budget performance objectives, because as we shared, a key goal of this document is to keep us aligned with the mission, vision, and value of our master plan, but also our regular goals here at the district. So thank you all for your time.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Looks like there's a lot of good work ahead this year, and hopefully the legislators will be excited about working on park-related issues. Are there any questions from any members of the PAC about what we just received? I see a thumbs up. I see a hand clap. I don't see any questions though. Okay. It looks like Director Lane, you'd like to say something?
Well, I just want to compliment our legislative staff for putting this together. And I want to point out that, you know, it is not a fluke that we often get what we call other people's money for projects. And one of the ways that we are able to do as many things as we can is our advocacy program and our strategic grant applications. So, you know, Park District has a reputation for being the big guy doing this, and you can see that it takes a lot of work and strategic planning to achieve what we do achieve each year. So I don't know whether the PAC has had a presentation like this before, but there is quite a scope which is laid before us as we go and talk to our legislators, both in the county, state, and at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lane. And we have been fortunate where Eric and his team come and give us this presentation so to keep us in the loop. So it's always really interesting. And we know there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to get those dollars. Okay, great. Well, the next item, we've got our last presentation item. We're also going to be hearing from Eric on this one, the future direction of the PAC.
Thank you, Chair Obringer. I wanted to keep this on the agenda as a standing item as we continue to reimagine the PAC's work plan. It's been another priority from our new general manager to make sure that the PAC feels, we use the value and the incredible talent that's included in this group to help the district through, as I think Irene said earlier, maybe some of the thornier issues that the Park District Board and staff have to deal with. And also really to make it a good use of everybody's time. And we heard you last year that there were moments where there was a little bit of lack of clarity. And so we're trying to better define roles and responsibilities. I have, at the general manager's direction, I have interviewed our entire board. We've had a couple conversations here at the PAC. And I've had a fairly lengthy session with our AGM group to really, and also extra meetings with the general manager to really hear perspectives about how to, reimagine literally what this group focuses on. And I think beyond just clarifying roles and responsibilities, I think a couple other things have emerged in terms of, we just heard about the trail user group and that might be the type of thing that the PAC could develop an ad hoc working group on that meets independent of these meetings. That's a model that I believe Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority uses. So that's one thing to consider. And then just overall, making sure that we are bringing the issues that are the priorities for the board to the PAC for consideration early enough in the process that it's a meaningful dialogue. So with that, I thought we might have a document to work through tonight, and we actually don't have a lot of time anyway, but it's not 100% ready yet. I do have further direction from the general manager before bringing it before this group. So I anticipate that by February. And apologies that it did not get here tonight. And if I get something approved earlier, or if I finish something earlier, I will. We can distribute it via email and maybe have some conversation prior to the next meeting on email or phone call or Zoom. So that's really the update I have. If there's any questions or additional input, I'm happy to take it.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. And so this seems like this was more of an informational item to keep us posted as we have been working on this for a little while. So we look forward to further updates when you have them, Eric. And, thanks for just keeping us updated by putting this on the agenda this evening. That was helpful. Okay, moving on to item number 7. We've got Pac Member Comments. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment this evening from any of our committee members?
Yeah, O'Brien, this is Sharon. I have a question.
Sure.
Go
ahead.
As the Park District sort of restarts events and programs, and in particular, are buildings like the visitor centers, are people required to mask and or be vaccinated in order to participate and to utilize our visitor centers?
So I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Director Lane would like to take that or if a staff person can answer that. What the policy is.
That would be
This is
great.
Ann Cassabon, Chief of Interpretive and Recreation Services, and I can answer that question. Visitor centers have reopened, and we are not requiring that people be vaccinated. We are requiring that they wear masks. We are offering hand sanitizer and have encourage social distancing through markings on the floor and signage, and have doorways open and windows open to allow for better ventilation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Director Lane.
Yeah.
Oh, and then I see Susie.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of dates for the trail user working group. Because if PAC members are interested in going to these meetings, you should have the date. The final meeting is February 7th for the working group. And the executive committee would normally meet at the time that was given to you, but it has a different date, and that is February 10th. So
Thank you.
if you come on the date that was listed, you'll be a day late. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Lane. Susie and then Neil.
Hi, thank you. I'm a docent at Coyote Hills, so I just wanted to mention additionally that docents, I believe, along with staff members, have been asked to provide information on our vaccination status. I presume that's because at some point, they'll open up programs for school children again and other visitors where staff and docents would be in direct contact with those people. So I just wanted to add that. And then ask Director Lane, when is it published that those committee meetings will be meeting throughout the year? I'm just coming up on 1 year. So I joined in February last year, and there was a list of the different committee meetings.
I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure they are on the website with the correct dates on them. I have my own little paper that I look at, and but I think they have the correct dates on the website.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Neil.
I was just going to remind everybody that the 2022 Trails Challenge is officially open. And I think just within the past few days, the shirts and trail guides have shown up at visitor centers. So you can go pick those up and get started hiking.
Great. Thank you very much. That's a great reminder. Ties in nicely to New Year's resolutions. Okay. So we're almost to the end here. So item 8, report from the chair. So not too much to report other than we have almost made it through the first meeting that I'm sharing. So thank you all for your patience with me, and look forward to serving in this role and having a great executive committee, including Neil as vice chair and Marie, who is finance committee chair, to work together this year. Board committee reports. I don't know that we have any of those because we haven't convened any committees. So the answer would be no. Is there any old business for us to discuss? Okay, any new business? Okay. All right, so the last item, if there's no other comments, we are going to adjourn our meeting at 5:50 p.m. And the next meeting that we have is tentatively scheduled for Monday, February 8th, 2022, virtually at 4 p.m. So I look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carolyn. Congratulations. You did